I will be talking about Ozzie Alonso's move to MLS and the Seattle Sounders. I so this isn't a huge part in the story, but I thought it was a cool note, and I'm gonna title my section on this one "How a Stranger's Kind Gesture Allowed Ozzie Alonso to Become One of the Best Midfielders in MLS History." Quite a wordy title, but you'll find out what that has to do with the story. Lots of sources in this one for me. I was able to get some info from Wikipedia. There's an article called 16 Years After Defecting, Ozzie Alonso is Happy by J. Sam Jones. An article called Freedom in the World 2007 Cuba by Freedom House. And Player Who Defected from Cuba Realized Dream, Longs to See Family Again by Andrew Miller. So Ozzie Alonso, one of the best midfielders, nay, one of the best. So I already screwed it up. Ozzie Alonso, one of the best defensive midfielders, nay, one of the best midfielders in MLS history, had quite the story of how his MLS journey came to be. He didn't join the academy at 14 and work his way through the ranks. He didn't get drafted out of college. He wasn't signed from a professional team abroad. No, he defected over from Cuba during an international competition with his national team and was able to get a trial with Chivas USA. Today, we're talking about his story. While I don't want to dive into the politics of why this was happening, there is some context that we will need. The year is 2007. Cuba is beginning to rebuild its economy from the tumble it took after the fall of the Soviet Union. However, the economy is still not in a great place at this point. And in that elections are controlled, corruption is common, and freedom of the press is heavily reduced, there were definitely incentives for Cuban citizens to defect from the country. When it comes to soccer players defecting, it is much more common than you may think, to the point where there's an entire Wikipedia page dedicated to tracking all of the Cuban players who defected to the US. There were even 5 more players who defected just this year after the 2023 Gold Cup was hosted in the US and Canada. Before we dive more into Ozzie, let's briefly talk about the man that inspired his defection, Mikel Galindo. Galindo was a member of the Cuban national team, and in 2005, he, along with his teammates, made the trip to the U.S. to participate in the 2005 Gold Cup. The squad qualified after finishing runners-up in the Caribbean Cup. While Cuba finished last in their group and did not qualify for the knockout rounds, Galindo took advantage of the wet feet, dry feet policy and stayed in the U.S. to try to earn citizenship. The wet feet, dry feet policy is a name for the interpretation of the Cuban Adjustment Act of 1966. Essentially, the act allowed the Cuban citizens who made it to the US to earn citizenship after a year. However, if a defector was caught in the waters between the US and Cuba, they would be sent back to Cuba or even to a completely different country. So since Galindo had already had dry feet, having been in the country for the Gold Cup, he stayed behind in order to gain citizenship. In 2007, the Gold Cup was again hosted in the US. I'm sure you're sensing a trend now. Cuba qualified as the third place team in the Caribbean Cup, and this time Ozzie was a part of the team traveling to compete in the Gold Cup. Alongside him was Lester Moore, a forward who was part of the 2005 Cuban Gold Cup team with Galindo. During the Gold Cup, Ozzie and Moore, inspired by Galindo, followed in his footsteps and stayed behind in the US. According to Miller's article, coincidentally, neither knew that they were going to defect, and both just happened to defect during this 2007 Gold Cup. Moore, however, had left after the team's exhibition match in New Jersey, where he caught a bus down to Miami. But let's get into the details of Ozzie's defection a bit more. According to Jones's article, Ozzie had to find a moment to slip away from the team, and the moment presented itself between games 2 and 3 in the Gold Cup group stage while the team was out shopping at a Walmart. Ozzie was able to slowly drift away from the team, and eventually out of the Walmart, but paused once he made it to the street. A 21-year-old Ozzie asked himself, "What do I do now?" as he stood there with no phone and nobody in Houston that he knew. So Ozzie walked for a while until he came to a guy sitting in the street and asked if he could make a call with his phone. The stranger graciously let him call, and Ozzie decided to call his ex-girlfriend back in Cuba. who was able to give him some advice on what to do. Afterwards, the stranger gave Ozzie a ride to the nearest Greyhound bus station and helped Ozzie buy a ticket to Miami, where he would now officially leave his family and Cuba behind, seemingly forever. When it came to soccer, the previously mentioned Galindo was able to help him out big time. Galindo, who previously played for the Seattle Sounders and now is with Chivas USA, helped to get Ozzie and more a trial with Chivas USA. Alonso was able to win a $12,900 development contract. However, he turned this down to sign with Charleston Battery in order to guarantee playing time. While his sole reason, while his in his sole season with Charleston, he would soar, winning team MVP, newcomer of the year, USL Rookie of the Year, and the team's Player of the Year as voted on by the players. All of this helped to secure him a move to the Seattle Sounders in their inaugural season in MLS in 2009. 250 plus games later, and Ozzie has etched his name into the hearts of Sounders fans forever, and certainly etched his name into the Sounders history books. Despite his initial concerns that he would never get to see his family again, during his time with Seattle, Ozzie's family and ex-girlfriend, now wife, were all able to be with him in the U.S. and see him play. Ozzie is currently a one-time MLS Cup champion, four-time U.S. Open Cup champion, one-time Supporters Shield winner, four-time All-Star, and one-time MLS Best 11. But his story is not quite done yet. Ozzie is currently with Atlanta, battling back from a major injury at age 37. Absolutely incredible. His impact and legacy on the league is self-explanatory, and I think we're all really grateful that he did decide to make the life-changing decision to come to MLS.
One of the greatest stories in that sort of, trying to think of the right way to put this, right, is the opportunity, right? The opportunity of the country and the league. That's what it's all about. And this story is exactly of that, from a Cuban star who really didn't have a chance to a USL standout to make sure that he could play and be noticed, working his hardest to be that player, and then earning his contract at Seattle, earning his legend status at Seattle, and still continuing is wonderful. And I didn't realize the Wikipedia page you had mentioned about the list of Cuban footballers. Well, if you go to 2002, do you have it up?
Yep.
2002, that first name, Ray Martinez. Ray Martinez and I currently coach together at Alfred. So the first ever away bus ride we do, what's called first year entertainment. Newcomers to the team will go in and either tell a story, a joke, sing a song, just a little initiation thing, right? And Ray actually told us his story. And it was one of the it's extremely moving, and it's very similar to my understanding for a lot of these people. You mentioned, you know, he had to find a way to sneak away, right? Ray and his teammate Alberto Delgado, there's this little blurb here, right? That they told them they were gonna make a phone call and then ran out. Well, they told Cuban national football team minders. That's a nice way to put it, to say that Cuban policemen traveled with them and guarded every single door to prevent people from running away. He came down, we're getting ready to go on the bus, and said, "Oh, I got to go and make a call," or, "Oh, I left something in my room. I'll be right back." And this point, everybody had already kind of getting on the bus, and they booked it, and they ran for a bridge or a road, like a common point. Well, Delgado basically told Ray, "Oh, I actually did leave something in my room. I have to go back and get it." And Ray said, "F that. I'm going." And he just ran and ran and ran and ran until he could find a taxi to get to the uncle's place. And I believe they also ended up in Miami at some point. But yeah, it was one of those things where literally he left behind his family. He couldn't tell anybody where he was going. Left behind all family, everything in there for a chance at a better life. And again, Ray ended up getting into Colorado for a little bit after playing with the Rhinos, or after that he played with the Rhinos and then a bunch of indoor teams, including the Lancers, where his story has actually been reproduced by Michael Lewis, who we may have on for this series later on in MLS history. But he's a big coverage guy for the Rochester Lancers, and he wrote a book called "The Rochester Lancers Still Alive and Kicking." And Ray, they called him Boom Boom Martinez. Ray Boom Boom Martinez is still a big part of the Rochester. He coaches the indoor team now. But he hit such a good ball, they called him Boom Boom. Right, every time he hit it, boom. And that story reproduced is something, you know, everybody should read, and I'll send you. It actually is in article form online and in the book. But this isn't like a, oh, I want to go play there, so I'm gonna hang out there for a few days. These people, when they make this decision, there's no going back, right? I think Ray goes back every once in a while now that tensions have kind of subsided. But I mean, he went years, like decade, without seeing family, friends, anything like that. He had to make his own life here, and it's similar for a lot of people, to my understanding. So the fact that people will take this chance and then continue to work every single day to get to where they are now, it's extremely in my opinion, very inspiring the way that they do that. And I'm very happy to have known Ray. Ray has taught me a lot about being a coach and how to approach different things in terms of soccer and things like that. And I'm very happy that he's here. And like I said, as happy as people are, they all make a good impact in where they are. You know, everybody who's made the, on this list and even further. So it's such a great story, and I think it's a fitting way to end the MLS 1.0 era is on this note of the greatest people will take the biggest risks, right? And that's what MLS 1.0 was a whole bunch of people taking a whole bunch of risks to say, let's put everything we can to put this together and make this league work. And now here we are nearly 30 years later making it work. So I thought that was a really well told story, Connor. Well done.
That's a great way to put the bow on MLS 1.0. Really great way to kind of just put an end to it. It's a lot of risks, and the risks have paid off. We're sitting with a league that's just hit record attendance numbers, a league that has the best player in history in it. Like, it's crazy. You never probably could have imagined that at this point in MLS's history in 2007.
Right. And then you talk about, this is a very similar point to where NASL was in their time. But the difference is we have a plan for after this. In my opinion, based off of when I was reading a bunch of competition, not competition, reading comparative notes. NASL, once they got these players in and had like 2 years of fans just showing up to the Cosmos games, we're like, all right, wheels off, go for it. And they crumble. I don't think there's relaxation on the horizon, but I don't think there's training wheels off type of thing. You know what I mean? So I'm excited to see where we go from here.